way to do that.
You can tell your friends. It's parts of West actually, kind of by the East area, a little bit south of Washington. Don't know these areas.
It's West Ashley.
Okay, West Ashley and then up towards Somerville along Highway 61. So kind of in Montana.
Don't know where we're going.
A little bit past Somerville. Very long. I'm always looking for volunteers. You know, so what is this? I'm
Everyone, we're going to get started in a couple of minutes.
This is incredible.
First, I want to welcome you to the Allan Drinking Good Relief Candidate Forum. I'm Sue's Greenhause. Allan is my co-host. This decision to have a candidate forum came about because of three things. One of the things we heard all the time was the dissatisfaction with our current representation. Everyone's frustrated by the current House of Representatives' inability to actually conduct business. And at this point, the margin can swing. At this point, it's 7 seats. Depends on what day you're looking at and who resigned that day. But it could change the course of what's possible. And the final thing was discovering we had 2 qualified candidates competing to be the Democratic candidate. So there were a lot of reasons why having people come in and chat with us, which we have been doing, and a lot of you have met the candidates at either functions or other functions, but we wanted to give people a chance to hear them talk about the same thing at the same time. The final irony was SCOTUS's decision to not make a ruling on our illegal racially gerrymandered district. So what was back in October a cause for celebration that they were going to take the case obviously turned into tremendous frustration. So I called it the icing on the cake. So those are the reasons why we had the forum. The format or the basis for this is an organization called Living Liberally, for anybody who doesn't know. It really is a place where you can find a community of people who share your values, where you can combine your politics with your social life. My experience as a new arrival in the Low Country almost 2 years ago mirrors that of so many others here and also across the country. I recently participated in national orientation. People have found that joining, for me, joining this Drinking the Good chapter has made such a difference because it's a way to find our political identity in a new area, to have politics be part of our regular life, and also it's been an entryway into the rest of political involvement. It's also been the source of a lot of laughs. Between the group that has been meeting together once a month, for me it's been 2 years, for some people like Allan it's more like 4, and probably there are people here who've been coming more like 7 years. On top of that, we have our Shopping Saturday, our Sunday Funnies, and our Mean Mondays. So if everything else is bad, we know we can always look forward to laughs on the Facebook page. The other thing is, for the last year, both candidates have talked about the significance of turnout. With or without We need to court those who have not voted recently, or those who might be willing to cross over from their traditional party position. So those are the reasons why we're having it. We asked for some questions from the audience. We tried to cover as many different areas as possible. We hope that you'll go back home and you'll each talk to 10 more people about what you heard or what you felt about the candidates, and also the importance of voting both in the June 11th primary as well as Tuesday, November 5th. At this point, the candidates will each have an opportunity to do a brief introduction, and the format will be, they'll each have 2 minutes to answer, and then whoever answered first will have an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal. Allan's going to do the first round of questions. You have 1 microphone to share.
So I'd like to invite Deford and Michael Moore to the stage.
He gets points for that, huh?
As I was doing that, I was thinking, how does my pants split?
That's exactly what I was doing.
Thank you all for coming. We're going to get started with some questions about.
No, first we're going to do your introduction.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you. First, we're going to do an intro. I think we'll start with Michael Moore.
They give us 1 podium, guys. We couldn't roll it around.
No, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being a part of our democratic system and fighting for things that you believe in. We are no longer in a world where we can take that for granted, so thank you. Again, my name is Michael B. Moore, and I have the real honor to run for South Carolina 01. In only 5 minutes, I guess what I would say, particularly since I see lots of faces that I've seen before, is just that my motivation, I have a motivation and I have an inspiration for running. The motivation is really based on my family. I've got 4 sons, I've got a 9-month-old granddaughter, and as I really thought hard and long about the world that they are coming into, it just became clear that that we all have work to do, and that I'm at a point in my life where I have amassed sort of an inventory of experiences and relationships and insight that could be brought to bear on this challenge, and to try to make the world a better place for them. I will say the inspiration, the why this as opposed to starting a nonprofit or whatever is really driven by the fact that if I'm elected, I'll be the 4th in the last 5 generations of people in my family to serve from South Carolina in elected office. And, my great-great-grandfather, Robert Smalls, who was elected to the General Assembly in 1868 and then served 5 terms in Washington. And the fact that I have the opportunity to run the same seat that he served in, that all sets a really powerful example for me to try to add value in this way. We'll have an opportunity, no doubt, to get into the issues, so I'll shy away from that. I'll just simply say about our campaign that we've got a wonderful campaign. We are right now at a really, I think, just a really healthy, great spot. We've got lots of momentum. We are in the middle of 50 events in 50 days, barnstorming tour around the district. I think we're maybe 31 or 32 now, and just feeling really good about the reception that we're getting. People are really resonating. I bring a kind of no-nonsense, common-sense approach to things based in my business background, and people certainly resonate with the notion that here's someone who is really endeavoring to serve them and to have their back in Washington. So with that, just as a short opening, I look forward to questions and to dive into it with you later.
Well, good evening. I know that this is not the typical drinking liberally, so I apologize for that, but I think you'll find this very informative. My name is Mac Deford, and I'm running to hopefully have the honor of serving you and representing you in U.S. Congress in Washington for the 1st Congressional District. I have been committed to public service for my adult life. In fact, my commitment to public service started when I was in 7th grade. It's an event that really solidified my commitment. I was walking in to 7th grade math class, and I remember seeing the TV in the corner that was on, which was weird because the TV was never on in math class. I remember the teacher and the students being fixated to the TV because it was the attack on 9/11. I remember seeing the images of the World Trade Center and the blurbs of commercial airliners that had struck the towers, and thinking about my father, who was in the air that day, flying as a commercial airline captain. I remember coming home from school and my mother coming home from work in tears because just a few years before, she was a United flight attendant. And United 93 was a flight that she flew frequently. And I told myself that night that at the first opportunity I had, I would commit my life to serving others and to protecting others. And so, after high school, the first chance I got, college acceptances in hand, I decided to defer college for roughly half a decade and instead enlisted in the United States Coast Guard, where I served as a federal law enforcement officer in search and rescue crew. And that's what brought me down here to Charleston. I was stationed right on the Battery on Trav Street. Part of my job was to train boarding teams to go out there, and I would also board container ships searching for illegal drugs, contraband, explosives. Part of my job was to keep our ports safe and our waterways safe, to respond to search and rescue calls, and go out there and save people in their darkest hour. And it was the greatest honor of my life. I eventually went to college. I went to the Citadel on the GI Bill, which is a Democratic accomplishment, and then the Charleston School of Law, and actually worked for a company here on Daniel Island, Blackball, as an in-house attorney. In fact, where Michael and I at the same time worked when he was head of DEI there. And eventually, after a couple of years, the call to public service rang again, and I answered it. I served as an attorney for Mount Pleasant, and most recently as the general counsel for the town of Hilton Head Island, working on many of the critical issues that we face now. When you get to Congress, they don't hand you a manual with all the answers. You have to try to figure it out and be part of the solution. And that's a big problem with our current representative. She's all bark, but when it comes time to actually finding solutions, she offers very little to nothing. And so I have actually worked on our issues to bring, for example, attainable housing to the Low Country, to protect our environment, public safety initiatives. I've worked on road and bridge projects, and now I'm looking to serve you in Washington to get a lot of the critical issues of our times and the challenges of our times addressed, which we'll be discussing here in just a moment. So thank you again for taking the time out of your days to be here with us, and I look forward to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question is going to go to Matt Ford to start. Which one job best prepares you for life? Which one past job best prepares you for life in the U.S. House of Representatives, and why?
Well, I certainly think that having that military background is important, especially at a young age. It gave me a lot of structure and also a lot of responsibility at a young age. Managing boarding teams, managing firearms training, for example. But my jobs in local government has best prepared me for this role. I mean, when you're the attorney for a local government and I joined the town of Mount Pleasant at the height of COVID. I was thrust into working on public health matters during a national crisis for South Carolina's 4th largest municipality, advising local officials on unprecedented issues related to public health. Those were turbulent times for our country, they were turbulent times for our community, and I'm very honored and privileged that I had the opportunity to add value during a very dark time in our country and help our local governments navigate that process. And so, also, on a lot of the work that I've done in local government, again, as I just mentioned, working on local issues that impact all of us in this room, from housing to infrastructure to protecting our environment. Those are all critical issues that we are faced with that a congressional representative has a lot of influence over, and I believe that my experience in local government has best prepared me for this job.
Well, I've got to at least preface this question by saying the most important job I've ever done is basically being a father. I've got 4 sons. As I mentioned, I've got a granddaughter. I have helped my parents through various health challenges. My dad got a rare form of stomach cancer and had a medication that cost, I think, $240,000 a year. And so dealing with Medicare, trying to get them to pay an appropriate amount, and dealing with the gap insurance, and just a whole mess that was a part of that episode. But I think probably the most professionally applicable job was being the founding president and CEO of the International African American Museum. That was a project that Joe Riley, former Charleston mayor, had that he had been working on for 15 years. It was his capstone project to create a museum on the site where the vast majority, the single greatest number of enslaved Africans took their first steps in this country. And you would think that that would have been universally embraced, but it wasn't. We had to sell that project in a variety of different ways. We had to raise money from the city, from the county, from the state, from private foundations, from individuals. We had to ensure that the integrity of the stories that were being told in the museum was as accurate as possible. So I think, I think that probably had the biggest thing. The other thing I would say is we raised a good bulk of that money from a Republican General Assembly that hasn't always been warm to tell this part of our South Carolina and American history. And so the opportunity to build alliances across the aisle and to get this done, I think was a big achievement.
You wanted a timer to break, not me.
Yes. So, yeah, right. Thank you. So the next question is, what is the biggest issue facing the Low Country that you hope to impact in the House of Representatives?
I was just talking with a couple in the back that live here on the island. From my vantage point, having worked in local government, having been on the front lines of what's happening in our communities, I think housing is the most critical issue here in the Low Country. And I say that with the qualification that there are other critical issues, such as improving our infrastructure, making sure that communities that don't have sewer service, for example, get sewer service, making sure that our bridges and roadways get updated so that they're built to withstand a modern population in today's extreme weather events. But none of those things are possible unless people have a place to live. When I talk to young people here in the Low Country, their number one concern is, where am I going to be able to live? I went to school here, I'm from here, I want to stay and live here and work here, but the jobs, the pay is not keeping up with the cost of living in this area. So I believe that housing is the number one issue. And look, legislation or not, your congressional representative, if I'm your congressman, I will be fighting for funding, be it enacting legislation or during the earmarking process, to get funding for our communities for attainable housing, both for rental units, and also for home ownership. Because it is imperative that all people have access to the American dream, and for many people, your home is your most significant asset. And so housing, in my view, is the number one critical issue in the Low Country.
So I think it's a little bit of a trick question. It's like saying, which of your organs is more important, your brain or your heart? You need both. I mean, I think women need reproductive freedom. I think that's a no-brainer. I think people need to be able to access a healthcare system that delivers consistently, high-performing care at an affordable way that doesn't bankrupt you. It's the number one cause of bankruptcy. But my orientation is that I think the most important thing, we all are attempting to, in one way or another, live the American dream. And I think the thing at the core of that is to have a good job that pays you a decent, good wage with good benefits. I think that's just a fundamental of our American system. We've been all promised, right, equal access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But at the end of the day, when there are many people who are struggling to have a job that pays for all the various necessities of life, they're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. We are now at a point where, for the first time, I talk a lot about the fact that we need to create a more inclusive economy. But we are now at a point where 30-year-olds, for the first time, are on average making less than their parents. And to me, that's just a shame. I have talked long about the notion that there was this promise when I was growing up that each generation would somehow almost automatically achieve greater than their parents. And we are clearly not in that mode now. Over the last few years, the top 1% created twice as much wealth as the rest of the 99% combined. And even as a business person who appreciates the opportunity that can come from business, that's just out of balance. And we need to create more balance and create a more inclusive economy where more people have a better opportunity to take advantage of their hard work and their ingenuity to take care of their families.
I'll just say, I look at this in different layers, right? As a congressperson, you have a small share of the national responsibility, and that includes international affairs and your influence in that. But when we're looking at local issues that impact the Low Country, of course, we have national level issues, and Congress must act to, for example, to enact sensible gun reform, of course, to protect women's reproductive rights, to strengthen education nationwide. When we're looking at the local issues, housing, look, we are not going to have people to respond to your home when you call 911. Our hospitals are already facing staffing shortages. Our hospitality industry, which is significant here in the Low Country, is taking a huge hit because of the lack of housing. Housing is extremely important.
Thank you. This next question is a multi-part question from Mr. Moore. First, so neither of you has held elected legislative office before. Who would you pick as a mentor? What would your dream committee assignment be? And is there anyone whose freshman year performance you most want to emulate or admire?
So I think being in South Carolina and being a Democrat in Congress, I would have the obvious choice for a mentor would be Congressman Clyburn, someone who I have known for probably 30 years, and he and my dad and he were buddies, and my grandfather was his advisor at South Carolina State, so I think that's a natural relationship to leverage. What committees would I be interested in? Again, from my standpoint, I'm deeply concerned about the economy, jobs, and so I would focus on that. I think the healthcare system is something that requires leadership, and then I would say education. And the third piece of that question? Mentor, committees.
Who's freshman year performance?
Freshman year performance. Well, I can tell you who's I would not look to. I'm not sure. A congressperson who I have a nice relationship with and who I very much respect for his standing out on the issues and pushing things. I'm not sure. Well, I would just say is Congressman Rokana from Silicon Valley. I mean, I think he represents one of the most wealthy districts in the country, but yet he's very progressive, stands out on issues, fighting for working families, fighting to have the back of American people, and that's the kind of example that I respect.
I don't know who particularly I would seek out as a mentor, but I think what I would do is seek out a mentor from the other party. I think I would seek a moderate Republican because not just as a mentor, but also to better understand where their side's coming from, because at the end of the day, if we're going to get anything pushed forward in this country, if we're going to move in the direction of progress and not aggression, we need bipartisanship. So I would seek out somebody with a differing viewpoint, but also that has the desire and the inclination to work in a manner of bipartisanship. In terms of committee assignments, the Judiciary Committee, I think it's incredibly important that we're appropriately screening our justices and our judges. As a lawyer, I'm very concerned about some of the folks that have been appointed as judges. I would like to serve on the Armed Forces Committee to make sure that our military is well equipped and getting all the things that they need, but also to address the issue related to waste in government. Because the Defense Department, look, I'm not saying we need to be completely slashing their budget, but there are areas in every aspect of the government where waste can be cut and those funds can be reallocated to be more effective. And then the third would be the Infrastructure and Transportation Committee. I believe very strongly that that's a critical local issue related to transportation and infrastructure, and we need our congressional representative needs to be on that committee if we're going to get the things that we need here in the Low Country. And in terms of the last question, somebody whose freshman year performance has been stellar, I think he is a freshman, I think. Jeff Jackson of North Carolina, who unfortunately was drawn out of his district, but is now running for North Carolina Attorney General.
I just will double down on Congressman Jim Clyburn. I don't think there's any Democrat who has been more effective in that body over a long span of time. I think he understands how to get things done. Certainly the fact that we are the first primary in the nation now is a testament to his leadership. And so I think he would be able to offer the council on how to maneuver the halls of Washington and how to get things done.
That was a great introduction, actually not even an introduction, but great answers to the questions. We're now going to look at questions assuming you are the nominee. And my first one is, what are the 3
pick. Nancy Mace gives us a treasure chest every week, just about. I think that one, you have to point out how ineffective she has been. And that of the extreme right flank of the Republican Party. She's part of that. We need investment in our infrastructure down here. We need to update our bridges. We need to rebuild some of our bridges. We're not known for the quality of our roads, folks. I hate to tell you. We need to invest in our roads and transportation. Nancy Mace voted no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And then what did she do when that money showed up to the Low Country? Anybody? She took credit for it, right? I mean, the hypocrisy of that has to be hammered in for the general election. I would also say that she supports Donald Trump, who has told us that he will be a dictator on day one. He has now just recently said, the other day in an interview, that he thinks that red states should monitor women's pregnancies. He has talked about gutting the Department of Justice and replacing career civil servants with his cronies. He's even called for the execution of former generals who didn't agree with him. That is not a person who should be anywhere near the White House, and the fact that Nancy Mace is supporting him needs to be hammered on. And guess what? This is the only congressional district in the state that rejected Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. And the third is Nancy Mace's stance on abortion. She says that Republicans should stop being a-holes to women. Well, guess what? When she was a member of the state legislature, she voted for a nearly identical 6-week abortion ban that is now the law here in the state of South Carolina.
So I think the three sort of approaches to Nancy Mace, one is around integrity. I jokingly say, who is the real Nancy Mace? Is it the one who critiques her party on women's reproductive freedom, or is it the one who signed the 6-week abortion ban? Is it the one who voted no against infrastructure spending, or the one who shows up to take credit? So I think there's a whole host of those kinds of things where Nancy has shown that there is no real sort of compass, moral, philosophical, or any other behind her. And I think people here in the Low Country deserve someone they can trust and who they know where she's coming from. I think the second issue is women's reproductive freedom. Again, I think that's a big issue around the country, and she is really using that issue in an illegitimate way when and where she wants. It's very clear that you can't both support women's reproductive freedom and then also be the co-sponsor of the 6-week abortion ban. And then I think a strong issue will be Social Security. She has come out and said that she thinks we need to cut Social Security. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Social Security is an earned benefit that people have paid into since their first job. They're 15, 16 years old. We can't pull the rug out from underneath seniors around Social Security. And so I think coming out strongly attacking her on that is also an opportunity.
One topic that hasn't come up, but I think it's there. What gun legislation do you think we need? The sub-questions really are: would you vote for an assault weapons ban, and why? And how about letting teachers carry in school?
So look, I think there are a whole host of common sense reforms that the vast majority of Americans actually already agree with. Some of you may remember, I think last May, Fox News had a poll about gun issues, and the majority of their viewers supported a lot of these common sense reform issues. So I believe that we do need to ban assault rifles. I don't think that compromises the Second Amendment. There is a line beyond which we just, as a society, agree that certain weapons are not appropriate. We're not going to let people have flamethrowers or nuclear weapons. And so we're just really arguing where is that line. I believe that assault weapons are on the other side of that line. So I would support that. The other thing that is just bizarre to me, I was traveling a couple of weeks back and rented a car, and right there at the counter there's a big sign, you've got to be 25 to rent a car, you've got to have a good driving record and good credit. I'm like, wow. But if I'm 18, no questions asked, I can get an assault rifle with a high-capacity magazine with no training, with no anything, and just how absurd is that? So I think whether it's increasing the age for one to be able to purchase guns, or I think red flag laws make all the sense in the world. You all remember maybe early in the fall, there was a mass shooting up in Maine, I think it was. The police knew the guy. They knew that he was a threat. They knew that he, had guns, but they didn't have the tools to be able to protect the community and to protect this guy from himself. So I think, a whole host of laws. Obviously, closing the various loopholes that currently exist. You have to have a background check, but if you go to a gun show, or if it's 24 hours, there's all kinds of things that we just need to tighten up. And leave it there.
Okay, sorry.
Technical
Robert's son.
difficulties. All right. Well, folks, look, I'm a gun owner, okay? My guns are locked up in a safe, and in another safe, the ammunition's locked up. But I'm an outlier in South Carolina, right? There's no reason why we can't have safe storage laws. Those don't take guns out of, gun owners' hands. Look, I served in the Coast Guard as a federal law enforcement officer. My first duty assignment was in Baltimore, Maryland. I was a Coast Guard police officer. Okay? I have been exposed to gun violence firsthand. I taught firearm safety in the Coast Guard, in our military. I know more about guns than any other candidate in this race on either side. Nancy Mace will have a very difficult time debating the issue of guns with me. In Congress, I'll tell you exactly what I would advocate for. Closing the Charleston loophole, which is, its technical name is the default proceed rule, which is a loophole in our federal law that says if your background check doesn't come back within 3 business days, then the gun dealer may proceed with the transaction. Guess what? That federal law is what enabled Dylan Roof to procure the handgun that he used to execute 9 individuals because they were black. Our federal law enabled that. Let that sink in for a moment. We're going to get that law on the books. I'm also going to advocate for red flag laws. We need to give law enforcement in our communities a chance to respond to critical issues as they arise. And that doesn't mean that the government is looking to take your guns away permanently, but if you are making threats or displaying behavior that indicates that you are a threat to yourself or others, law enforcement needs to have the ability to remove the guns in order to figure out what's going on and then let that be adjudicated later. There are a whole slew of other gun reforms that we can use that will not take guns away from law-abiding citizens. And yes, I would support an assault weapons ban. Those are not civilian weapons.
So just in closing, I would say, as Americans, we are all making a value judgment in the way that we approach guns right now. We're saying that it's more important that we adhere to not just the Second Amendment, not just the founders' interpretation of the Second Amendment, but to the NRA's perverted interpretation of that piece of legislation. We're privileging that over protecting our kids and our communities, and we just have to do better. We are better than that, and we just have to have people in Washington who have the resolve to do the people's business and to change these laws.
We're going to speed it up a little bit, since we know that we both support having a woman have the right to choose her decision. It's her decision. Instead of going into the details of it, are there any restrictions that either of you would want to see added or codified? I should say. And that's assuming the Democrats get the House and we actually get some action on it. Michael goes first.
So I just fundamentally believe that the decision is between a physician, the woman, and her physician. I don't believe that government's role is to get in between that, and I'll leave that up to the physicians to help guide that decision as appropriate.
Look, my maternal grandmother lost her life at 31 years old. She was the mother of 8 children. And she lost her life because in 1960 she was denied access to the right to make her own reproductive choice, to a backstreet abortion. That is where South Carolina and a handful of other states that have enacted these extreme abortion bans have taken us. And so, for a party, the Republicans, that claim to be a party of limited government, that's an awful lot of government when you're talking about the potential next president talking about monitoring women's pregnancies. Okay? These are decisions that are up to a woman to decide, that she makes in consultation with her physician.
So this question goes to Mac. What would you do about the immigration issue, and what changes would you want to see in the current bills that are stalled in Congress?
So, I'm also the only candidate in this race who's protected the border. I protected our maritime borders as a member of the Coast Guard. I've been on the front lines of many of the issues that are causing a lot of concern, especially as it pertains to the southern border. Look, we do have lethal drugs coming into our country. We also have firearms going from the United States into Mexico and South America that are being used to arm cartels. And we have to do everything we can to combat that. But we also need to remember that the image of America is not a giant wall. It's the Statue of Liberty. And we should be welcoming those who want to come to our country and participate in the American experiment and contribute to our society. That is what we are, a nation of immigrants. And so I don't think, look, you can have border security and safe, effective immigration at the same time. Both can be true. But it is very dangerous for a lot of these immigrants making their journey to the United States. They come by water, they come by land, many of them die. We can be more compassionate while securing our border. And so I would like to see investments made into technology. We don't need to build a wall, but we can leverage technology to secure our border, but also making sure that DACA recipients are granted citizenship, fast-tracking the citizenship. We've been here, they grew up in this country. Those people that are already here, give them a fast track to citizenship. Guess what? The argument that they're stealing the jobs, that's not a real argument. Guess what? They contribute to the tax revenue that helps us fund these critical projects that we need here in the Low Country and all throughout the country. So both can be true. We can have a secure border and have compassionate immigration system that welcomes all those who wish to be here and contribute to America.
So this is an issue that I think is, it's just been so politicized that it's difficult to really understand what's what. People on the right are using this as a wedge issue. They're using it to incite fear and anxiety in people. There's a racial aspect to this, which I think is just grotesque to me. The facts are that this immigration challenge, first of all, if we just start worrying about the problem at the border, we've already lost. It's a hemispheric problem that requires a hemispheric solution, and we need to work with our allies, work with partners, even more seriously than we are now, to come up with solutions. I think there are lots of businesses in the United States who would love to be able to expand their operations, perhaps their manufacturing or whatever, down in Latin and South America to try to stimulate some economic stability that could then help to stimulate some political stability so that people don't feel the need to come hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to try to come to the United States. I will also say that there is a real dishonest aspect of this in the sense that many American companies are actually luring folks here to be able to exploit them for their labor, particularly seasonal kinds of work, people in the meat packing business and other kinds of jobs. And we just got to get honest about this whole issue. I think we need to set an agenda of laws that make sense, that are fair. It is unfair that folks, for example, from Haiti have a different set of laws than folks coming from Cuba. The only difference there being race, for example. So I just think we need to, there's a broad overhaul that needs to be done. And I think, quite frankly, that Nancy Mace and other Republicans are quite vulnerable on this issue because they had an opportunity to do something more than had been done in many, many years, and they chose politics over the issue.
I'll just say that what is happening with regards to immigration is a human rights crisis. It's not blown out of proportion. I have friends that are down on the border right now in the U.S. Coast Guard that are working on the border, friends in the healthcare space that are witnessing very sick people. They are witnessing people die, and the sooner that we can reform our immigration system to make sure that those who wish to come here legally can do so efficiently and safely, the more lives we will save. And so I think that's incredibly important, and it's something that Congress needs to stop kicking the can down the road. And I will say that both parties need to get it together and pass sensible immigration reform that both secures our border, but also that allows those who want to be here the right to come here.
And I'll just quickly just underscore the comment that I made before. Republicans don't have any leg to stand on this issue because they had an opportunity to do something, to make progress, and they're I was going to say a not nice word about our former president, but former President Trump obviously suggested that might not be politically advantageous to him, and so he killed that deal. They had an opportunity to get something done. They chose not, and so I think that just speaks to how politicized, inappropriately this whole issue is.
So this next section is focusing on education, which is very important to me personally as a parent. And this question is for Michael Moore. What is your position on school vouchers and privatization of public schools?
So first, a bit of context. I approach this issue from an interesting vantage point. I'll just put it that way. My wife is a teacher. She teaches special needs kids at Philip Simmons School, not far from here. Both my parents were academics, college professors. 3 of my 4 grandparents were teachers, and my great-great-grandfather, Robert Smalls, wrote the legislation to create the public school system here in this state, which is the first free, compulsory, statewide public school system in the country. I understand the value and the benefit that comes from education. There's solid research that shows that lifetime earnings is directly tied to education and quantity and the quality of education. I deeply disagree with any of these schemes to skim off money from the public school system to fund charter schools or the like. I think we've got to fix our public schools. We need to invest in them in ways that deliver a more consistent public school education, high quality education. I think we're 47th out of 50 states. That's embarrassing. We can do better as a state. South Carolina can. So I believe in aggressively funding our public schools, figuring out ways to, perhaps in some innovative ways. There was an interesting, I don't know if any of you saw Hicks, his opinion piece in the, I don't know if it's opinion piece, his whatever it was, his article in the Post and Courier, I think, day before yesterday, about an innovative way of funding public schools that looked at schools that had children who had particular needs and funding against those needs to be able to deliver the kind of experience that they all need. So I think this is an important issue.
Well, I think it is abhorrent that South Carolina is 47th in the nation when it comes to public education. I find that unacceptable. I would also find it unacceptable if South Carolina was even number 2. We need an educational system in this country that is second to none. Okay? Education is the foundation of our country. Our young people, in the United States, the greatest country that has ever existed, our young people deserve access to a quality education that is accessible to all. We are not going to continue to be the leading country in the world, the leader of the free world, if we are not educating our young people. And that also means supporting our teachers, making sure that they're not working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, making sure that those who want to go into the teaching profession are going to be able to stay in that profession. Sean, who's on my staff here in the back, was a history teacher, high school history teacher. He's not a teacher anymore. Because how can a teacher in South Carolina afford to live in the low country? And so if I'm elected to Congress, I will fight very strongly to advocate for increased funding, not just for teacher pay, but for infrastructure. Because we have a lot of schools, I don't know if you all seen, we have air quality issues. We have outdated systems in our schools that need to be upgraded. That impacts health for our children. That needs to be addressed. And we need to get the radicalism away from our school boards. I know that that's a local issue, but if I'm your congressman, I'll be on the phone with the United States Attorney General demanding a civil rights investigation when you have school board members who are banning books based on racial context. That is a civil rights violation.
So just a quick follow-up. Are you for or against public money for charter schools?
I am against charter schools completely.
You brought up some of the local issues that we're having with book banning efforts, which gained national attention. This question is for Mac. What do you think about the rise of extremist groups like Moms for Liberty and the push to ban books and inject a biblical worldview into our education system?
Well, there's something called the separation between church and state, right? I mean, we should not have religious ideology being injected in forcing national, state, or local policy. That's between you and your God and your church. It doesn't belong in our schools because not everyone adheres to the same ideology or religious beliefs. Again, if I'm your congressman, I'm already asking for civil rights investigations. But I'm also advocating for legislation that will protect educational freedom. I mean, we need to be able to educate our young people and teach them what happened in this country. The dark chapters as well as the shiny, sunny chapters. We are a nation of progress and setbacks, and our young people need to understand that and where we came from in order to know which direction we are going to move in. And I just think that the Moms for Liberty group has done a tremendous amount of damage here in the Low Country and all throughout the country. And again, they would be the subject of a civil rights violation if I had my way.
So I think I'm going to take a step back and talk about why these groups have popped up. Because I think without understanding the cause, I'm not sure that we can come up with solutions. So I just, look, and not to get too deep and too philosophical, but I think Republicans in their current incarnation are basically advocating for the haves, for the 1% and the very wealthy, but they've got to come up with these issues, wedge issues that are really designed to ultimately distract and to divide people. I think, whether it's banning certain books or banning certain topics, I think it's un-American. I think it is anti-intellectual, and I think it is backward, quite frankly. But I think there are plenty of people who are not on the right side of the issues, they're not on the right side of the demographics, and who need these wedge issues to try to divide us. And hence, Fox News has an enormous cultural impact on this country. And so we need to figure out ways to dismantle that bigger issue before we can really do much about the tactical kinds of expressions of those bigger issues. But I was the founding president of an institution that is now likely one of the more important public institutions in the region, whose purpose was designed to tell the stories that had been long muted in this country, and certainly in this part of the country. So I understand the challenge and have been a part of a process to do something about that. And so I engage with this issue very intimately.
Okay, so Michael, would you support a bill enacting anti-trans laws or restricting or eliminating gender-affirming care?
I'm not even going to stand up for that one. Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. I think, look, again, this falls into that same sort of span of behavior that I was talking about in the last answer, where people are talking about it, are attacking other human beings who might be different in some way, which is just completely illegitimate, and it's immoral, and it's un-American, frankly. And so I think, I feel embarrassed to have to say this, and I know I don't in front of this group, but I think all Americans have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in whatever way that manifests for them. And I think we need to be outspoken in supporting that. I know today in Colombia, they were arguing this issue. They were talking about these trans bans, so very important.
So the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees you the right to be safe and secure in your person without the threat of an unreasonable search or seizure. Well, it is a seizure of human dignity to try to tell someone or prevent somebody from expressing their identity. Who are you or me or anyone else to tell another person what their identity is? That is up to one person and one person alone, and that is the individual. This is about bodily autonomy now that we're fighting. Last year here in South Carolina, it was about abortion. Guess what? They won the battle. They're not going to win that war. Now it's attacking trans rights. What's next? Former President Trump has already said that he supports red states monitoring women's pregnancies. Are we going to eventually have checkpoints now? I mean, what kind of country will we become if we continue to seize individual dignity? So, I think that goes without saying where I stand on that issue.
I thought we had to finish at 7, so cut
Oh,
it off.
yeah, I got a few more minutes.
Oh, thank you.
People are lining up for the movie tonight. Can't interrupt that.
Possession is 9/10 of the law.
Okay, so this last section is going to be on election reform. What is your position? This question is for Matt. What's your position on term limits? And should we have standards for availability of precinct mail-in voting? That's
For what,
Can
please?
you repeat the last question?
That's your question. Should we have standards?
The third part was, we are not a state that's particularly friendly to voters who are working and
Sure.
national standards of everybody do it the same way.
What is the question? We didn't get that.
Okay, try again.
Maybe
We didn't hear the
Just
question.
on the
Just
first part.
term
Do the
limits.
first part.
Okay. For term limits, I think this is probably the only issue.
Get down.
Check, check.
We wore it out.
Hello, hello. All right, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well. Hello? All right. This is probably the only issue that Michael and I have disagreed on. I do support term limits. I do support term limits. Look, we need to be ushering in every so often a new generation to take their share of the responsibility to meet the challenges of our times. Look, South Carolina has term limits for the Supreme Court. Look, I'm sorry, but it can be so damaging to have a Supreme Court justice or a group of Supreme Court justices who really shouldn't be there, and then we find out years later what they're really capable of in shaping our policy. And then that takes away from our democracy the will of the people to choose and puts it in the hands of 9 justices, for example. So I do support term limits for the U.S. Supreme Court. I do think that they should be fairly lengthy term limits so that they can maintain their independence. But I also do think that a lifetime appointment is not good policy for the United States. I also support term limits for our legislators. We don't need to be electing someone that is going to spend an entire career in Congress because you can get complacent and maybe a little too comfortable. And so it's good to have constant refreshing of our legislator that reflects the makeup and the challenges of our times with people that have the vigor and energy to go and tackle these complex issues.
So I think this is it's a complicated issue that might not apply evenly across all positions. I tend to agree that the way the Supreme Court is currently sort of manifest that term limits likely make sense. I'm not sure that they make sense for representatives that have to run every 2 years. I mean, I think, again, you talked about the importance of expressing the people, expressing their will. Well, I don't know that I would want to take that away from the people. And look, there are plenty of representatives. Congressman Clyburn's been in office a long time, and he's one of the more effective people in Washington, partly as a result of his tenure there. So I think, and then the other just quick point on this, a lot of this issue around term limits came, as you'll remember, into the current lexicon around Newt Gingrich and the Tea Party and all that. And so I'm just skeptical about just that aspect of things. So I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all approach to this. I think maybe we look at different positions and think about it differently. But ultimately, I believe that the will of the people is what should prevail.
I want to say, look, you can absolutely have immense respect for Congressman Clyburn and for other members of Congress who've been there for a long time. But there's sometimes more than one way of doing things. I think, and it's my belief, that it's good to have people cycle out. It doesn't mean that you just give them 2 years and they're done. I also actually think that the term limit for the House of Representatives should be 4 years.
Yeah.
Because do you really want, when you elect your new congressman or woman, to go and turn around and have them start campaigning right away and focus on fundraising, which is a whole nother issue of campaign finance, Citizens United, which I despise? Or would you want your representative to actually work on the issues that you sent them there to do? So I do think that we need to have that discussion about term limits. I don't know what it would look like, but I do support the concept of it, especially for our Supreme Court.
All right, I think we'll have to go to closing statements now, since we only have 8 minutes to go. So we'll start with Michael.
So I appreciate you all being here. Again, it's important, and I appreciate your energy and commitment to our process. At the end of the day, this is all of the talk that we've all had here is really doesn't go anywhere unless you can win. And so that's what we are focused on. And I will tell you that our approach looks at a couple of key things. First, I look at the fact that when Joe Cunningham lost, he lost by less than 6,000 votes, about 5,540 or something like that, despite the fact that there were 73,000 non-white voters in the district who just weren't even inspired to come to the polls. I think there's opportunity there. They gerrymandered the district, took out 30,000 black voters, but even with that in the gerrymandered district, if Dr. Andrews had gotten just half of that non-white vote, she would have won. So again, I think we provide the best opportunity to engage with that community, to give them a reason to feel inspired to come to the polls and to vote, and we are already working hard at that and feeling really good about that. The other thing is there are 113,000 left-leaning women, many of whom are pissed off, rightfully so, about the assault on reproductive freedom, and we are working hard to galvanize that group and to give them an opportunity to really sort of express that frustration through their support for our campaign. Just a couple of days ago, we had a wonderful Women for War event where over 100 women came, and the energy was awesome. And I see some faces here who were there, and it was just a great event. So we think that's an important piece. Third, young people are going to be very important. Gen Z they say, is going to be the most active politically generation in maybe forever. And we've already got a group of 20+ campaign fellows, people who will be tasked with connecting with other young people over mediums that they communicate on and about issues that matter to them as it relates to our campaign. We're excited about that. And then I think the fact that Nikki Haley beat Donald Trump does indicate that there's a larger group of moderate Republicans that are just rejecting all things Trump. Most moderate Republicans are driven by business interests, and I didn't get a chance to talk about my background, but I've been a CEO for the last 25 or so years. I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. Charleston Business Magazine named me one of the 50 most influential people in the region. I've done business on 4 continents. I've engaged with foreign heads of state. I speak moderate Republican. And so we feel good about both the support we're already getting from them and the additional support that we'll get in building a coalition of Democrats, Independents, or moderate Republicans. So we are out. We've got a really wonderful field organization on the ground. We've been canvassing. We've been doing phone banking. And we are connecting with folks. We think that human connection, talking to people, listening to people, that will be just a key aspect of success in this race. And we are lucky to have the person who ran that for both Obama campaigns here in the district as well as other battleground states leading that effort for us. And we are grateful for that. But the last thing I would just say really quickly is, this is going to be a race where we're going to have to get all of you out. Doesn't matter whomever of us wins, we all need to be out. We need to roll up our sleeves. This is a race that can be won, but it's going to take a lot of volunteering, a lot of energy, and I would just tell you that we are as hopeful as we've ever been now. We've got enormous momentum. As I mentioned, we're in the middle of this 50 event in 50 days, and just really feeling great about the response we're getting. So thank you much for your time.
Well, I want to thank you all again for taking the time out of your day to come out here and listen to Michael and I talk about our platforms. Look, this is a very important election. Not just this congressional election, but all races are important. From your local elections all the way up to the White House. And I believe that this election year will decide what direction we are going to move in for at least the next 4 years. Now, the one option is down a very dark road, in my opinion. If this country re-elects Donald Trump. The other direction is the direction of progress. And that is up to you to decide what direction we are going to move in. I would not have jumped into this race if I didn't analyze this district and see a pathway to victory. However small, however wide. This district will be won by the Democrat who can earn the most bipartisan and crossover support. Yes, we need Democrats to get out and vote. And we need to energize the base. I have traveled every corner of this district for the past year and showed up, listened to the concerns of all communities, African American communities, the Latino communities, the Gullah Geechee communities. I have experience working on some of those issues, such as heirs property and sewer, and that some of our communities lack in. But this election will be won by the Democrat that earns bipartisan support. It's just the math of this district and the way they drew it. As Michael just said, this is the only congressional district that didn't vote for Donald Trump. This is also a time where Nancy Mace is more exposed now than ever. She has lost support from not just independents, but also Republicans. She doesn't have many friends up there in Washington. And guess what? We have been getting bipartisan support since day one, and it's only increased, despite the fact that Nancy Mace has Republican challenging. We have gotten support not just from independents, but Republicans and former Nancy Mace donors have donated to our campaign, and it was unsolicited. We are going to win this district. We're going to flip the House of Representatives, and we're going to go in the direction of progress and not down the dark chapter that Trump will take us down.
Before we get stoned,
No.
before we get stoned by the residents here, I just also want to thank everybody who took the time to come here to listen, and hopefully you got some perspective. I know I did, and I've heard you both a number of times. So thank you, and if your members are ready, if you know I'm drinking liberally,
You're the change of these. Oh, I know, me too. I love it. Am I the most obnoxious person I've ever met? Of course. Oh, right, of course. New York. Oh, that's right, it's dog. Yeah, the big brown dog. That is so, I'm so glad you're here. That is so funny. Oh my God. I'm Mac's biggest fan. You said you've met fans. You've met Mac. I met Mac here. So funny. Oh my God, I'm so glad to meet you. Yes, I enjoy your trolling so much.
It's really obnoxious. Isn't it?
I love it so much.
Yes. Yes, my daughter.